Hello, and welcome back to the Keighley Poltergeist with me, Stephen Miller. So it's a very belated episode 6, a case update, but it is nice to be talking about Keighley again. Since the series finished, a good few months ago now, the case has had loads of interest. I get lots of inquiries about it. I've done some talks in person and online. New people are still discovering the series and the wider Poltergeist project from the Keighley case. Can I call it my favourite series? Maybe. It certainly remains the one I find the most challenging as a skeptic, and the information in this update has only increased that feeling, to be honest. But it's been months since episode 5, so why are we back? Grab a coffee or a tea, sit down, relax, and we're going to dive into this update. I finally made it down to the Society of Psychical Research archive at Cambridge University to see their file on Keighley. On the day, I viewed lots of poltergeist case files. To be honest, I was kind of waiting for them to bring me the Keighley file. The archivist produced them one at a time for security reasons, and it turned out that Keighley was the last one of the day. It was a thick, brown document wallet. It was the biggest one I'd been given, so I was pretty confident it was going to have some good stuff for me to go through. But what did the archival documents tell me? Well, the first document I'm going to talk about is a letter and a report from Mr. Bell, who, I'm sure you'll remember, was the mill manager at Prospect Mill in Keighley where Gwen worked. Now, this letter, the one in the archive, was a copy sent to Sir Oliver Lodge, but he'd also sent an identical letter and report to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I knew of this letter, but I'd never seen it before, and I didn't know he'd sent copies to both of these men, which I'll come on to later. A reminder about Sir Oliver Lodge. He was a really big deal in the world of science. He was a renowned physicist and electrical engineer, and his research was key in the development of the radio. He was the assistant professor of applied mathematics at Bedford Uni, professor of physics at Liverpool College University, and then principal at the University of Birmingham. He was knighted in 1902 by King Edward VII. So here's an extract of the letter to him. 29th of April 1925. Dear Sir, knowing your work with the occult world and your natural interest in poltergeist, it's not a word I'm very familiar with, but clearly it's a poltergeist derivative, I am taking the liberty, on behalf of my employer, of bringing to your notice a remarkable case which we have employed here, and at the same time asking your advice on the matter. I enclose a full report of the incidents which have occurred during the past few months, which are verified by witnesses also employed here. So a few things about the letter. It's typed on headed company paper from Prospect Mills in Grove, Keighley, so I got the mill right through my research. Also, Mr. Bell mentions the word poltergeist, so there was clearly a suspicion locally that this was a poltergeist case. From the newspaper reports at the time, it made it out like this idea was first suggested by Conan Doyle. Clearly not. Some of the following report is familiar, but it does have some details we've not heard before, and it tells some of the incidents in a slightly different way as to how the newspapers reported it. So for fullness and transparency, I'm pretty much going to read the report as Mr. Bell wrote it. I'll skim over a few bits and summarise them. Now, I'm going to read this from the actual report, so let me just bring it up. The great thing at the archive, I was able to use my camera and take photos, so I didn't need to transcribe everything there and then. So this is Mr. Bell's report. A report on incidents connected with Miss Morley being a suspected case of poltergeist. Previous to Miss Morley being employed at Prospect Mills, she was with Messrs. Robert Cloughs. They informed us that in August 1924, for a period of 2 to 3 days, batches of consecutive ends broke down on different room in which Miss Morley was working. Beyond that, they can say no more. Nothing further having occurred between that time and the time Miss Morley left. Now, we know that Gwen spent some time in hospital in the summer of 1924. She had something, kind of a breakdown after a failed relationship, and there was report of poltergeist activity in hospital. Back to Mr. Bell. Miss Morley entered our employ on the 21st 21st of October 1924. But it was not until the 4th of November that anything peculiar was noticed. It was reported to the manager that batches of consecutive ends were breaking down very frequently on 3 spinning frames in the room in which the girl was employed. Investigation was made by our mechanics with a view to ascertaining a supposed mechanical cause of the fault, but nothing appeared to be wrong, and further investigations did not prove satisfactory. We had occasion to send Miss Morley into another department, and it was noticed that the spinning became normal once more. This suggested that the girl was the cause of the trouble. On Wednesday, the girl was brought back, and almost immediately it was found that the ends were breaking down on the machine to which she had been sent. The matter was reported to the Woolen and Worsted Research Association, and a representative was sent over. He made certain tests relative to the humidity of the atmosphere. It was clearly demonstrated to this gentleman that the ends only broke down when the girl was in the vicinity of the machine. I personally saw 24 ends break down when the girl was in position shown on the enclosed sketch. I had on the previous day also seen 3 similar breakages. As suggested by the Research Association, we earthed the girl and the frame, but this produced no beneficial result. On the Thursday, this propensity for breaking down ends was demonstrated to Mr. Hay, the principal of the firm. The girl was brought into the room and asked to walk down a gate with her hands in her pockets. After an interval of a few minutes, a number of ends broke down. This was repeated on different machines, spinning different counts, and also on different classes of spinning machinery. In every case, ends were found to break down. On Friday, the girl was sent into another department in the new mill, and on her way there passed one of the machines, and a number of ends broke down here too. This class of machine is again different from the ones with which the girl has previously come into contact. So this concludes the definitive evidence of the girl being able to perform acts contrary to normal experience. It should also be stated here that a small experiment was carried out with Miss Morley. 2 unexposed negatives, supplied in separate sealed packets by a local chemist, were obtained. Miss Morley placed her left hand on one of the packets and looked intently at the other, which was reared in front of her. The time was 2 minutes. The negatives were then sent down to the chemist, with the seals intact and developed. The print showed indefinite formations, the one from the left hand being rather more strongly marked. On the following Monday, certain occurrences were brought to our notice by Miss Morley and one of her friends. It would appear that on Thursday evening she returned home about 8 o'clock from a shopping expedition, and on entering the room, a photograph of her father fell from the wall over the mantelpiece. This was replaced but fell a second time. While Miss Morley was sitting by the fire, some few feet away, 1 or 2 ornaments also fell off the mantelpiece. Somewhat later in the evening, she was blackleading the fireplace when a small clock jumped off and hit her on the head. Nothing more was apparently observed that evening, Miss Morley going to bed. On the Friday evening, a table which was covered with washed china moved and upset the tea things onto the floor, all of them being broken. The table is stated to be about 4 by 3 foot. The girl was sat in a chair some 2 foot away. This was witnessed by her mother, who stated that the girl had not touched the table. Later on in the evening, the windows rattled, knocks were heard on the door, and on investigation nobody was found to be there. The cellar door flew open a number of times, and ornaments in the room were broken. The local doctor was called in, and he attributed the whole thing to hysteria. Later on, the same evening, on going to bed, the curtain rod on the staircase fell down, and a mirror in her mother's bedroom fell out of its frame and broke. The landlord told the girl that she would have to find alternative accommodation for the next few days, as they could not have these sort of occurrences taking place. On the Saturday, Miss Morley went to stay with Mrs. Baker, one of our spinners. During tea time, the table oscillated. Miss Morley thereupon had her tea upon a small stool beside the fire. A number of small ornaments fell over and were broken, and beyond this nothing of any moment took place. On the Sunday, Miss Morley, who was by this time becoming very much upset, had what she described as a fainting fit, during which we understand she became unconscious and talked a lot, chiefly about a man who was coming. In the evening, she called on another doctor, Dr. Hardy. He ridiculed her statement. Fortunately, however, another of our employees, Mr. Wilkinson by name, was able to corroborate her statement. While he was speaking to the doctor, Miss Morley, along with two other ladies, was in the waiting room. A scream was heard. It would appear that the table in the waiting room had upset the papers, and at this point, Miss Morley again went into this unconscious state, making exclamations such as, "He's coming! He's coming!" Dr. Hardy recommended her to see a panel doctor. She went to see him, and he took the case to be one purely of hysteria. He told her that if she did not give up being such a fool, she would find herself in a lunatic asylum. This statement apparently preyed on the girl's mind, and on the following Monday morning, after one or two demonstrations of ends breaking down, it was seen that the girl was in such a state that it was considered advisable to send her away for a few days' rest to some institution or other. She was taken in the afternoon to the Wadilove Nursing Home, where she remained for approximately a fortnight. During that time, she only had one fate, during which she still continued to make similar statements. She was seen by Mr. J. Arthur Hill, who questioned her, and during this questioning she informed us she felt considerably better, and that a certain sensation had gone from her so that she felt herself to be quite normal again. It was decided by our Mr. Hay to send the girl and her mother to Morecambe in order that she may recover to her normal state of health if possible. She came back on the 27th of December and returned to the mill on Monday the 29th. She had not been long in the spinning room before the ends again commenced to break down. I personally saw a batch of 6 ends break down, and it was reported by the overlooker that this had occurred 6 or 7 times up to the breakfast break. The girl was therefore taken off and put on some other work. She told the overlooker that she felt much better, and also felt she could mind the frames without anything taking place. She was put on to mind the frames, and this time nothing occurred. From this time until the 3rd of March, Miss Morley did not cause a great number of ends to break down, but at intervals she would have a number of so-called fainting fits, which took the form of a cataleptic trance, during which she would become perfectly rigid and fall to the ground. These attacks would have a duration of 3 to 5 minutes and would sometimes reoccur very frequently during the day. These, however, would only take place for 2 to 3 days at a time. On the 3rd of March, having had several of these attacks, she was removed to the Leeds General Infirmary, where she was placed under the care of Dr. Maxwell Telling, who previously in January and February had seen Miss Morley on 2 or 3 occasions. On the 14th of April, she returned to her employment, the report being that it was thought that she might be an epileptic. As she'd had an attack on the meeting, she was sent to work in the canteen, it being believed that there would be less chance of anything occurring. But on Monday the 27th, the following incidents occurred. Now, the report then goes on to list, things like jugs flying around, copper tea urns breaking, tables overturning, lots of things that we have seen in previous reports. Quite a long list of these. It goes down to, number 14, and it's all pans, buffet tables, baking boards, tables, chairs. In particular, it's a bit like the Hewitt Mackenzie report in that sense. It says what happened, kind of how much it weighed, whatever it was that moved, who the witnesses were, and exactly where Miss Morley was and how far away that was from the origin of the movement. So it's interesting, but it's similar to what we've heard. That goes on for a while. And then we get to Tuesday the 28th of April. It was decided to remove Miss Morley to the new mill and put her to work cleaning machine parts. But she was brought at 12 p.m. as Dr. Chalmers was expected to pass the new hands. At about 1:45, the factory doctor, Dr. Chalmers, who had called to pass some hands, was asked into the canteen, as he'd previously expressed a wish to see anything unusual of this nature. While in the kitchen, he saw a table at which the staff were having dinner rise and fall and move about several times, but being rather sceptical, he thought it was caused by the girl pushing the table with her legs. A few minutes later, while seated in the canteen, he saw one heavy service table, which suddenly jumped out and turned over very violently, Miss Morley at this time was in the corner of by the sink, some 3 to 4 feet away. Dr. Chalmers, who saw this, attempted to turn the table over in a similar manner, was unable to do so, partly on account of its weight and partly because of the position in which it stands. This was seen by a number of gentlemen who were in the canteen at the time, and also by Mrs. Parker, who was passing at the time, and her foot being trapped underneath the table. Sounds painful. And then again, it lists a few more incidents before it ends on a final one. A waste paper basket rose slowly into the air about 4 feet and floated over a table and some chairs before turning slowly on its side, and it commenced to shake the contents onto the floor, finally righting itself, actually fell to the floor. This was seen by Miss Hillary, Miss Melton, and Miss Morley would be some 10 feet away. It should be noted the basket is very light and the contents were not very large. At this time, Miss Morley was sent out of the mill, told to go for a long walk, as it would probably be better for both her and for the kitchen staff, who were becoming very much upset. Understandably so. So that's the report, with some skipped over of the incidents, but that's the report that Mr. Bell sent to Conan Doyle and Lodge. There's some interesting details, like the name of the home Gwen was sent to in Bradford, and the numbers of different doctors she was seeing at the time. Wadilove Health Centre, as it is still in Bradford, still operating today. Today it supports people with learning disabilities. Also, there's some more details on the phenomena. In particular, that waste paper basket at the end, levitating, floating across the room, turning on its side and emptying itself before righting again and then crashing to the floor. That's impossible, isn't it? Surely there's no skeptical explanation for that sequence of movements occurring. It's either 100% paranormal or it didn't happen. And that's a difficult thing to weigh up, given the witnesses. Now, we know that the letter to Arthur Conan Doyle was passed on to Hewitt Mackenzie, and that set off the chain of events as described in this podcast series. But the Oliver Lodge letter was a bit more complicated. Both letters were posted on the 29th of April, 1925, but Lodge was abroad at the time, so his PA forwarded the letter to friend of the podcast, John Arthur Hill. I guess because he's mentioned in the letter having seen Gwen, and he also lived nearby in Halifax. Hill replied to Lodge's PA, but he didn't let anyone else at the SPR know. Let me get Hill's letter up. This is back to Sir Oliver Lodge's PA from the 1st of May 1925. I have read the letter and report from Mr. Bell about the Keighley case, and now return them herewith to Sir Oliver's attention when he gets back. I did not know that the phenomena had reoccurred. Mr. Bell told me he would let me know if they did, but probably his employer desired him to write to Sir O and Sir ACD instead. It is some months since I saw the girl at the Wadilove nursing home, and I have discussed her case with Dr. Maxwell Telling. I'm not sorry that Mr. Bell has not informed me, for I should not have known what to do or say. I have little doubt that the girl possesses physical phenomena powers, and indeed I am disposed to think that she might make one of the most remarkable mediums we have ever had, if developed. The man she sees in her trances is apparently trying to get control, but I did not feel justified in taking the risk of having sittings and proceeding on the usual development lines, particularly as Maxwell Telling took a rather orthodox view. Neurosis, etc. I thought that if the phenomenon would stop, as they seem to be doing, it would be best for the girl. But what seems to be required is for someone like Baggerly, he was an SPR investigator, to have the girl in his service and to study the phenomena. I don't feel like doing it myself, for I don't want physical things happening, say, in the middle of the night. My sister would not like her china to get smashed. So I should not know what to advise, yet I do think that the girl ought to be investigated. My idea was, if the thing reoccurred, and Dr. Telling sanctioned sittings, my sister and I might sit with the girl and her mother, might interview the control, by which he means the spirit, get to know what they want to do with the girl, and perhaps might successfully suggest that these things should not happen except at sittings. In fact, the physical things maybe merely desperate signals to draw attention, and they might cease if communication were established. But I should not care to develop the girl's powers without Dr. Telling's sanction. I don't think much of the neurosis and epilepsy talk. There's no explanation of things moving without being touched, but Telling is a doctor, though friendly to psychical research, and doctors do not like to admit that they cannot explain in their own terms. I should like to see a copy of Sir O's reply to Mr. Bell, if I may. Yours sincerely, John Arthur Hill, sorry. And then he has a little PS. The letter is typed, but his PS is handwritten. He's also written it kind of vertically on the side of the letter to squeeze it in, so I'm kind of trying to read this up with my head on the side. PS, she seemed sane enough and not excitable or hysterical. That's his view on Gwen. Again, an interesting letter. Lodge eventually returned home, and he replied to Mr. Bell on the 5th of May. He also forwarded everything he had on to Eric Dingwall, who was the senior SPR research officer. Dingwall, who I think is going to become a friend of the podcast, but not yet, was a very interesting character. I'll definitely talk about him more in a later series, but I'll mention here that his nickname was Dirty Ding, so make of that what you will. Anyway, he was very interested in the case, so he wrote directly to Mr. Bell offering to come to Keighley himself to meet him and Gwen. Now, this was on the 6th of May, but we know something he didn't. It was already too late. Hugh Mackenzie and his secretary, Muriel Hankey, had whizzed up to Keighley and were making arrangements to take Gwen back with them to the British College of Psychic Science in London. Mr. Bell replied to Lodge and Dingwall to that effect on the 7th of May. Dingwall was furious. He blamed Hill for not informing the SPR, and he writes a letter to Hill. Dear Mr. Hill, as I said in my last letter, Gwen Morley is now at the college and doubtless will shortly be on exhibition with charge for admission. All this would have been avoided had the Society known of the case at the beginning. For then we should have prevented ACD, Arthur Conan Doyle, or his friends from having any influence over the girl. If her parents knew that she was under the influence of these people, they would be exceedingly annoyed. No doubt Mackenzie was sent up by Doyle with flattering introductions, and so the poor people were completely deceived as to the true state of affairs. In another letter he writes, this is an excellent example of the reasons why this society so often fails to obtain subjects for research. Bold words, Dingwall clearly not happy. He also writes a letter, he's kind of feels like a bit like a grass. He writes a letter to the president of the SBR to let them know what had happened. The president was Eleanor Sidgwick. She was one of the first female students at Cambridge. I actually walked down a street named after her on my trip to the university library. And she's a sister to former Prime Minister Arthur Balfour. She agreed that everything was all rather regrettable, but she felt it was largely unavoidable. She ends in her reply saying, I hope they will not injure her health at the British College, as the LSA apparently did that often. The LSA would be the London Spiritualist Alliance. So, it's a bit of internal soul searching going on for the SBR. What it also reveals are the divisions within the world of psychic science at the time. I guess not surprising. Dingwall clearly wasn't a fan of Mackenzie or the college, and Eleanor Sidgwick took the opportunity to have a little dig at the London Spiritualist Alliance as well. Does Dingwall's slur on Mackenzie and the college have any bearing on our case? I had initially thought they did pretty well by Gwen, They listened to her, helped her, gave her employment, lots of time and attention, and seemed to, quieten things down and enabled her to lead a kind of normal life afterwards. But could they have been overplaying things for publicity or for reputation in the psychic world? Clearly getting to Gwen first had turned into a bit of a coup for them. Or maybe it's all just sour grapes from the SPR and Dingwall's frustration with his own organisation that actually is to come out later in his life. Who knows? I do think there's something really interesting about this period of the SPR. There's some amazing characters involved. It might be something perhaps I'll come back to, maybe as a special episode or a mini-series or something. It'll be the SPR's 150th anniversary in 6 years, so it's a good time to be doing some new research in preparation for commemorating that anniversary. In terms of the Keighley Poltergeist, I guess that'll be it for now. Unfortunately, it seems the files held by the British College for Psychic Science were destroyed in the Blitz, so I don't think there'll be anything else out there, but I suppose you never know. For me, the SPR file on Gwen, despite raising some concerns about Hewitt Mackenzie and his college, actually strengthens the paranormal explanation for this case, which is difficult for me to say as a pretty ardent skeptic. I've now researched hundreds of poltergeist cases, and for me, you can forget Borley Rectory, Battersea and Enfield. Keighley is the most compelling poltergeist case in UK history. A huge thanks for listening, as ever, and diving back into Series 1 of the Poltergeist Project with me. I've shared some images from the SPR archives on the Poltergeist Project Facebook page, and I'll put some more out, so head over there and give it a like and a follow. Next up, we'll have the second episode of the Wyke Poltergeist, another West Yorkshire haunting. The SPR had a file on Wyke as well, so I'll be sharing some information from that, including more letters from our good friend John Arthur Hill. After Wyke, I'm planning to do a series based on another SPR case file, one that's never been reported on or researched before, so that'll be exciting, so look out for that one. Well, for now, goodbye.